this relationship is valuable insofar as it highlights the idea of a united front, an anti-US, anti-Western coalition of illiberal countries coming together. And the message that Russia and North Korea are trying to say is that the US and the West cannot isolate either of these countries, because if they do so, they will fail.
Now, I want to talk about North Korea and Russia, where they have strengthened that relationship with a military pact, promising a fortress of mutual aid. Kim Jong-un says he fully supports the war in Ukraine. He's promised to boost munitions for Russia. And Vladimir Putin is calling for a review of UN sanctions against North Korea. So Dr. Edward Howell, the North Korea foreign policy specialist, is with me and is on the line. Hello to you, Dr. Howell.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me on. It's very good to be here.
You're very welcome. Can you just give me an appraisal then of Vladimir Putin's visit and what it really adds up to now?
So Putin's visit wasn't unanticipated. He agreed to do this after Kim Jong-un was invited to Russia last September in 2023. And at this visit, they had several hours of talks. This is the current visit, which went from yesterday to today. The two leaders had several hours of talks. Putin was welcomed along a red carpet, the streets of Pyongyang festooned with images and portraits of Putin and Russian flags. And we saw sort of two quite significant moments. The first was Kim Jong-un firmly supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This was expected. And the second was that the two countries signed a deal, an agreement, in terms of mutual assistance in the event of aggression. Now, this clause is not specified. We don't know the full details of this treaty that has been signed, the agreement, and we don't know under what conditions this mutual defense treaty might be enacted. We don't know actually whether Russia or North Korea would enact this clause. But what it is interesting for me is that this signals some similarities with a 1961 agreement that the Soviet Union signed with North Korea that did pledge mutual assistance and had an automatic intervention clause in the event of any attack.
So, look, how valuable is this relationship to Russia beyond having a supplier of munitions for the war in Ukraine? Is that enough? Is that just an end in itself?
So I think that this relationship, the foundations of this relationship are transactional. They started in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia gets a supply of a lot, millions of rounds of artillery in exchange for giving North Korea cash, food, and military and technological assistance. Okay, now that's a necessity for Russia. I think that moving forward, though, this relationship is valuable insofar as it highlights the idea of a united front, an anti-US, anti-Western coalition of illiberal countries coming together. And the message that Russia and North Korea are trying to say is that the US and the West cannot isolate either of these countries, because if they do so, they will fail.
And does that then materially affect any calculation when it comes to NATO's confrontation with Vladimir Putin in Europe on the eastern flank of NATO?
What's important here is that this meeting highlights that actually Russia's war in Ukraine is not just a Western Europe, NATO problem, it's East Asia's problem as well. And I say this because when the NATO summit takes place next month in Washington, South Korea and Japan and the United States will be there. And I think the three countries really need to put on a concerted, coordinated effort to oppose what's going on between Russia and North Korea. Because even if the war in Ukraine ends tomorrow and Russia doesn't need North Korean artillery, I don't think that this relationship would just end immediately. Trade, military trade proliferation is likely to continue.
Yeah.
And that's very, very worrying.
Right. And what about China thinks of all of this, Edward? I mean, they have a North Korea there on the frontier, which is a mercurial power at the best of time. How will they be viewing all of this?
It's a really important point to mention because China and Russia do have a mutual defense treaty. It's one of the only mutual defense treaties that either country has with another state. And China, I think, is going to be playing it very cautious. China obviously has strong economic relations with North Korea. It's North Korea's largest economic partner. China also has strong relations with Russia, as evidenced by recent meetings between Xi Jinping and Putin. But crucially, I think China will not be actually very happy with what we've seen today. I think China would not want the relationship between Russia and North Korea to get too close, because China will be losing out. China matters far more to North Korea than Russia does. China wants a slice of the pie. And I think historically this is really important, because China was a signatory to the Korean War Armistice Agreement.
Yes. Tell me a bit more about why China may not be entirely happy, because they do have a certain amount of leverage over North Korea, certainly when it comes to economic support and that sort of thing. So maybe North Korea having another friend in the shape of Russia weakens that leverage. Is that part of the problem?
That's one issue, but there's another issue, which is that actually China is one of the largest trading partners of South Korea. Okay. Now, Russia and South Korea have strong economic relations as well, but I think China will want to make sure that nothing happens that completely alienates South Korea.
Yes.
Because, if North Korea and Russia continue to develop strong ties, well, the South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, is going to be faced with a real dilemma. He was asked only a couple of months ago, or even earlier than that, what he would do if, Putin went to North Korea, and he said the South would have to review their relations with Russia on a case-by-case basis. Clearly, he hasn't been able to provide lethal aid to Ukraine because he doesn't want to. Okay. And I wonder whether today will be a sort of a clear red line when we see the full details of this mutual defense pact, comprehensive strategic partnership, whatever we want to call it, of South Korea taking a more active role in supporting Ukraine.
All right, so it's like an interesting game of three-dimensional chess. Dr. Edward Howell, good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.